4 different, bacterial issues we deal with. Common blight we see all the time, pretty regularly in our fields, right? And it's generally not too much of an issue. We really don't have too much data on, copper products to spray on. That is an option, like in season in terms of management. Certainly, certified seed is really important. I know, there's certainly cost savings using bin run, and you can do that, but you've got to be careful, right? There's potential risks doing that. You might be introducing anthracnose potentially, right? Or some sort of bacterial disease if that seed hasn't been screened and cleaned properly. So that's one of the things that's really sort of popped up. That's a little bit concerning, and we're just trying to get a better sense of how widespread it is.
Well, this isn't a disease, but our old enemy, the Mexican bean beetle, came for us, is it?
Very severely, or? Yeah, okay.
Mile or 2 over this direction here.
Oh, okay. Anyone else have much issue with Mexican bean beetle?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
2 years.
All right.
Black last year and red, small red this year.
So, I mean, damage to pods and beans, right?
In some places, defoliation.
Oh, okay. Wow, ouch. Yep. So you've been through and sprayed for those as well?
Well, we're organic.
Okay.
So yes, we sprayed. We started spraying around the outside. We had good luck.
Yep.
Kill this year. Used a different product last year. And no luck.
What did you put on? Yeah, that's all right. I was just curious what you're using as an organic producer. Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm not an entomologist, so sort of outside of my zone, but yeah.
About $46 an acre just for the chemical.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, not cheap. All right. So Scott sort of mentioned, white mold. I guess we'll talk about that really briefly. Let's give you all a quiz, I guess, to get started with. So what are we looking at inside that red circle there? What do you guys all need glasses too? I just got a script the other day. In that red circle, what are we looking at?
Little mushrooms.
Little mushrooms, yep. Little mushrooms, what are they? We see them all the time, right? No, they're not.
No, not yet. That's it.
So those little fungi there, little mushrooms, they're good guys. They're just breaking down corn stover and whatever else. And these guys are called bird's nest fungus, right? Looks kind of like a little bird's nest, right? There's little balls of spores in there that splash out and spread this thing around. I totally get why we confuse this with the white mold mushroom, because they're really common. But I know a lot of people are mistaken about, what we're actually looking at. So if you see a carpet of what you think is white mold mushroom, it might not be, right? Jill's a graduate student with me, and she's working with Jamie Wilbur now as well. And she's been out, and she was really questioning herself, I think, at the start in terms of like, what am I looking for? She started looking in, when did you start looking for apothecia?
1st of July.
Right. So we sent her out, go look in some fields, and nothing, right? So she's starting to doubt herself, and then sure enough, we start actually finding the white mold mushrooms themselves. So they tend to be, I don't know, a little bit sort of flatter in shape. They're very small. There's her finger for reference, right? So I don't know, somewhere down to maybe even at least 1/8 of an inch, potentially up to about 1/4 of an inch in size. Maybe a little bit more sort of flesh coloured. Those bird's nest fungus too can look a little bit more tan, lighter in colour at the start of the season. But one of the projects that Jill has been working on is trying to figure out when these apothecia are coming up, and can we use that spore caster model in dry beans? Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, is anyone here familiar with Sporecaster, or do you think for their soybean bills? Yeah, do you nod? Okay. So where we are at right now with Sporecaster is you really want to increase its accuracy for use in dry beans and potatoes and under irrigation. So what I've spent my summer doing is traveling across the state, looking at a bunch of different dry bean fields, soybean fields, and stuff like that, and making note of when I'm seeing apothecia and in what quantities. So we can go back and look at maybe what kind of variables have led up to big flushes of apothecia to try to predict that for the future to help with spray timings.
And we feel from the work that's been done in both, Wisconsin was the lead with that particular model, right? And we've done a lot of work here as well. we feel pretty comfortable with Sporecaster in a dry land setting. We're far less confident in it in the irrigated models that we have. And so that's one of the other really important pieces that Jill's been working in, both soybeans and dry beans and potatoes. Under irrigation, how do we need to tweak that model to have better prediction? Because I feel we're just sort of missing. Earlier this season, in fact, the dry land model was showing much higher risk than the irrigated model, and that doesn't really make much sense, right? If you're irrigating, you should be at higher risk to white mold. So that's one of the things we're trying to fix. I'm guessing, from Jill's work that the Sporecaster model should work pretty well for dry beans. I have a little doubt as to whether it's going to work well or not. One of the things that Jill's been incorporating is taking canopy coverage measurements, because when those apothecia form, it's typically after canopy closure, right? Because those white mold mushrooms, they need that certain filtered light quality and quantity to form properly. If the rows are open, they're not really going to form. It's got to be filled in. So I have little doubt that it's going to translate, but knowing, when the dry bean canopy is closing relative to soybean is going to be an important piece in that too. Obviously, soybean will typically close earlier than dry bean just based on planting date alone. So there may be another factor in the model that we need to tweak.
So Marty, one of the questions I've had is how many flushes of the apothecia do you get during the course of the year?
Yeah, that's a really good question. How many times should we be spraying, right? And how often are those mushrooms actually flushing? So generally, like once they flush, you're exhausting that sclerotia body that the apothecia comes out of. So it's not really going to flush again, or if it does, it might put out a second week mushroom, but it'll sort of go once, and that should be it for the most part. There's always going to be a few exceptions, but for the most part, it's one and done. But what can be happening, of course, is we can have these sclerotia buried at different depths, or in between the row versus under the row, they're going to flush at slightly different times because of different shading and microclimate effects. So that flush can continue for a period of time. And actually, Jill, why don't you talk to what you were finding in terms of when you were finding the apothecia?
Yeah, so the first apothecia I found came around mid-July. And then when we hit the peak in apothecia, I was finding the very most in the first and second weeks of August. And it was similar to what Marty was saying. It peaked at one point, and then it all came down across all the different locations I saw too. So it's not like we had two separate peaks or anything that looked like that.
Yeah. And are you still finding them?
I'm still finding them at one location we have at our Montcalm Research Station, but that's our extension center, right? So we're kind of pushing disease a little bit more. And so at our variety trials, at the commercial fields I'm looking at, I'm not seeing them anymore. So we're past that apothecia flush for sure.
Yeah, we've definitely got a good history of white mold at that Montcalm farm. We're over on a section that's been in potatoes, right, for a long time, Evan. And you guys were right in front of us last year.
We had white mold trial there, managed to get mold last year, so it makes sense that you're still seeing a few more there.
Yeah, I think, just following potatoes too, right, they're susceptible to white mold, and so it's kept that sclerotia load pretty high in the soil. So
Makes sense.
We're happy because that's what we want to be looking at, right? We want to be looking at fungicide treatments or trying to develop better models. So Scott will be over later, but he does all the fungicide work in dry beans. One of the things I think we are going to switch up, him and I talk a lot about, strategies to what should we be looking at. And I think one of the things we'd like to look at is like a 3-pass fungicide system for white mold. Is anyone doing a 3-pass system at the moment? No, not many of you. And it might not be economically viable, right? Especially if you've got low white mold pressure. Again, we don't want you to be spraying if there's no point, but I think we need to be collecting those data points. We've got an industry colleague that certainly, he's sort of got a bias in it, right? And he's pretty, he thinks he's seeing, protection from that 3-pass program. And I believe it, especially if you're in a situation where you do have that pressure of white mold and you've got to be flowering too, right? I mean, that's another really important piece here in terms of being susceptible to infection. So, any other questions? We're doing a lot of root rot screening. So we're working with Francisco and Evan and Leo, the dry bean crew. So we've got, I think 30 different commercial entries. And how many did you guys put in?
I think we've got about 80 breeding lines.
Okay, so quite a few, 110 different lines that we're looking at. all in the Rhizoc trial?
No, there's about 50 there.
50, okay. So about 50. So Rhizoctonia is very aggressive, of course, and many of you know that, right? And so what we're looking at there is some of the germplasm that they're developing and then some of the commercially available varieties and how they stand up to Rhizoctonia. So a lot of the different companies have been glad to participate and provided seed for that. So this winter we'll have data on how those different varieties stacked up against Rhizoctonia. And then with you guys we've got Fusarium, Oxysporum, Braziliense, right?
We're not doing Brazil.
Not Braziliense this year. Okay, Oxysporum, is that it? Just
Oxysporum.
Do we do Pythium this year?
Not this year.
I can't keep up. We do so many different trials, right? But doing a lot of screening, and this is all at the plant pathology farm where we can actually load up the soil with the pathogen. And we've got a pivot there that we can obviously run over and make sure we get the soil wet when it needs to be wet to make sure we push disease and screen these different varieties. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. And Leo in the end there is a postdoc from Brazil. He's got a lot of expertise with drone imagery from your PhD work, right? And from your postdoc. So he's looking at a lot of that as well with us at that farm there and at your other locations too. Did you want to say anything about that work or?
We're going to talk about a little bit.
Okay, next one. All right, no worries.
Out of time. We're within a couple minutes. We need to move.
Yeah. Okay. So any other questions? I guess. Do you guys want to talk about tar spot? Do you think we can find any over here?
Hope not.
What do you reckon? Should I go have a look so we can find some? Any other questions coming up? So it's basically everywhere. I can see 4 lesions, 4 tar spot, 5, 6, 7 lesions on this particular plant. I'm really not too worried about yield loss this year. It's very light, right? We're probably 100% plants infected or 50%, very high number, but the severity is really low, right? So it's not going to do a great deal. It may certainly keep blowing up, right? As the season finishes, we are sort of unusually warm and maybe a little bit drier, I don't know. Are we getting much dew at the moment last night? Some, yeah, heavy, okay, but it's burning off quickly, right? I guess I'm thinking when it cools down again, that dew period's going to be extended as well. So this disease takes about 7 hours to go from a spore landing on a plant to infecting the plant, and about 2 weeks between, generating a new tar spot on the plant. So it's pretty rapid. If we get repeat of 2018 or the 2014, white mold epidemic that we had, we'll be in trouble because there'll be a lot of ideal conditions for this disease to develop. So it's easy to find. So I guess, take a minute to check your fields for tar spot. At least just know what you're looking for this season. So next season you can be out scouting a little bit early, in July and making that decision on the fungicide application.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Like here on your thing here, like that, what kind of yield reduction are you looking at there?
So,
Is it how high on the plant it's dependent?
yeah, so basically it's, certainly if it's all down low, right, and if it's not, we're probably good to go, right? We're probably fine. And I didn't open any ears. We must be a dent by now up here, right?
Yeah, we are.
Right, and so when you hit the starter dent, you've still got about 30% or thereabouts of dry matter to accumulate in those kernels, right? So keeping them healthy now is still important. I wouldn't recommend a fungicide spray now. I think it's way too late because we're into dent, right? We've set a lot of that yield now. So yeah, severity certainly drives yield loss. So certainly if this is up at the top of the plants, and at this time of the season, yeah, we're going to have a pretty big penalty, right? Once we get into, if we're seeing this in October, yeah, it doesn't matter too much. It shouldn't have too much of an impact. So the earlier it comes on, the greater an impact it's going to have, right? Generally, when you're spraying for this, first of all, we want you to plant the best genetics you can. There's no silver bullet, right? But make sure you speak to your seed dealer to make sure you're weeding out any dogs and just planting the better material that you can find. There's definitely differences in hybrid, right? So that's really important. Then if you put a fungicide on, we prefer you to wait until about R1, VTR1, right? If you're putting on early vegetative, you're not going to get the disease control. You're definitely not going to have disease control now. Yeah, you might get a strobe like plant health, yeah, maybe a bit of a bump, whatever. Yeah, great, and that's fine. You can make that decision. But if you're trying to control tar spot, you really want to wait probably till about R1. And we're trying to fine tune that at the moment, and Jill's working on some other projects where we're trying to figure out exactly when. Should we be waiting to brown silk, R3? I don't know. That's what we're trying to figure out. Yeah.
Doesn't that affect the lodging?
Absolutely. I don't think it's going to affect this field because it's fairly light severity. But yeah, be checking your fields with tar spot, especially if one's got more tar spot than another. It really affects stalk integrity. Absolutely.
I'm
So
sorry.
that's okay. Go.
At what level do you consider it, becoming severe? You counted what, 6 or so on that particular leaf at this time.
This is not severe.
So what is the threshold?
That's another problem, right? So if we were mid-July and we were like this, spray it. Yeah, because we've got, so many months to go, right? Now they're at this part of the season, and we're well into R5, we're too late. We don't need to keep trying to protect and save that photosynthetic area. The one problem with this disease is it can blow up and move pretty quickly, right? So I was talking about 2018. This is over in Allegan County, right? And this corn should not have senesced by the start of September, right? So Steve Kuhlman found this July 6th in his fields. We came in August 10th or 3rd and put in a fungicide trial, and it was the only green island in that whole field. And so by August 24th, you can see sort of browning patches. There's some gaps in the field just from flood damage, right? But those brown patches, they ended up lodging because there was just so much disease already ripped up the plant by late August, that it caused those plants to lodge. Does that answer your question? Yeah, the threshold. So one thing we've been trying to figure out, what is that threshold? And it's hard, right? Because it depends on the hybrid, the timing of the disease coming in, and then what's the weather outlook, right? If we're wet, yeah, put a fungicide on. If we're going to be dry, it's going to slow disease.